Good evening. Happy Shabbat to one and all. It's a pleasure to be with you. Hello, Kirk. Hello, JB.
Good evening.
Good evening. JB is not exactly in the eye of the Hurricane Harvey, but inland from it, the U.S. is being struck with the most severe hurricane in a number of years. I guess it's a class Category 3 at this point, and going to bring 3 feet of rain to certain parts of Texas. That's a lot of water.
What do you say?
Yeah, I also heard that the storm surge could be up to 12 feet in certain places. It's hard to imagine a 12-foot storm surge. There'd be no way to stop that. I saw people out with sandbags, and you think of the number of sandbags that'd be required to stop a 12-foot storm surge.
You're going to have to go about 13 foot high at least.
Oh, you are 13 feet high, probably 100 feet wide at the base to have enough strength, and because water will just go around it, like imagine a line, it just go around it. It would probably have to be, 50 to 100 miles wide or long, by the 100 feet wide, and 13 feet high. I don't think there's enough sandbags in the world to stop the surge of water. Boy, we are certainly living in amazing times. I saw from Terry, Kirk's wife, an email where the top rabbi in Spain, a country, by the way, that is named for Hebrews. It's the Iberian Peninsula, and Iber is the Hebrew word for Hebrew. That Jews are no longer welcome. It's like the time of Maimonides. The Muslims are wont to say that their treatment of Jews demonstrates that they are capable of being peaceful and that they are better than the Roman Catholics during their worst time, which was during the Inquisition, based upon their treatment of Jews. Well, when marginal Muslims were briefly in charge of Spain, it was you could live as a Jew. But shortly thereafter, Maimonides and really all Jews living in Spain had to leave. In fact, it was so bad, they left south into the northern rim of Africa, places like Morocco, to get away from the terror and prejudice imposed on them. And so the highest-ranking Jewish rabbi in Spain has said that based upon the immigration of Muslims over the past 2 years into Europe, that it isn't possible to survive as a Jew, and that if Jews do not migrate out of Europe, the whole of Europe, and into Israel soon, they will pay a horrible price. He was inferring that the kind of price they would pay would be similar to what they endured during the Holocaust. It would have been unthinkable to imagine that Yahweh would have to rescue Jews from places like America and Europe, places that value multiculturalism and tolerance, based upon what we saw just 2 years ago. But now, after America's ill-fated invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria and bombing of Libya, there are so many Islamic migrants out of those areas, millions of them, that they have fundamentally changed the situation in Europe. And now, to be a Jew in Spain, this time last week we had the Barcelona Islamic terrorist attacks, and to be a Jew in Spain or in France, Great Britain, almost impossible. And so what we're going to share is Yahweh's song. It's a prophetic song about what's going to happen in the last days. It begins with an ode to his beloved, which would be to Dode. And the song takes the shape of a parable, a metaphor, if you will, about a vineyard that is planted but then corrupted by man. So I think everyone knows that I'm pretty excited to return to Yahshua. We have been away from it because we wanted to pursue the meaning of Shemach, branch, and to distill everything we could learn about how God was using it as a verb to flourish and grow, and as a title, the branch, and why this branch always went through Dod to Yosha. You know, we're one to think of Yosha as the branch, and it is indeed a metaphor that is a title that's ascribed to him far more often than the title Maaseh. But in fact, virtually every time that that Yosha is presented as the branch, it's in context with Dod. And so both men are branches, one explaining how to observe the Torah, the other demonstrating how to observe the Torah. One without the other is really inadequate, because without Dod's explanation, we don't know, we don't really have a good grasp of how Yahweh fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim. And yet with Dod, we know exactly how this would occur, which is why in the midst of it, Yosha cited the 22nd Mizmor, which was Dod's most profound eyewitness account of what would happen exactly 1,000 years after he wrote it. So it is a pleasure to be back in Yashaya. The goal of observations was to begin with several really interesting parables about Yahweh as our father and the set-apart spirit as our mother, speaking to their son. You can view the son as Dod, as Yosha, or you and I as members of the covenant, all fit, and explaining to us how to avoid the deadly plague of religion, particularly appalling Christianity. And from there, we decided that since the symbols of whore and Babylon and adversary were used to link Hasatan, Satan, to religion, that it would be in our interest to work our way from the beginning to at least the 14th chapter of Yashaya, because it is in the first 14 chapters of Yashaya that Yahweh systematically takes us through the reasons that he hates religion. He directly associates religion with Babylon, which means to confuse by intermixing, with Hasatan, Satan, giving Satan a name, is telling us that Satan grew out of the satanic religions, grew out of Babylon, telling us specifically that the way that religion works is to present Satan as God. In Christianity, the Lord is Satan. In Islam, Allah is Satan. And so religion exists not to worship God, but to worship Satan as if he were God, to fool people into worshiping the devil, thinking that they are in fact worshiping God. And of course, the whole thing is just so preposterous, because a God that would want to be worshipped is a God that isn't worth even knowing. You know, I drive by regularly a mega church in this community, and it announces that their worship services are on Sunday morning at 10:30. And you want to just drive by and knock on the door and say, why are you worshiping God? I mean, if your God created a being to worship him, he's disgusting. He's insecure. It's revolting. And all you have to do to think that through is imagine yourself, if you had the power, creating something to tell you how wonderful you are. And it would get old and in the first 60 seconds. And I'm going to tell you, 6,000 years ago would reach your news. Yes?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. You know, the only God that really is worth being worshipped doesn't want to be worshipped.
Of course not. It's preposterous to worship God. It is so demeaning to God. Moreover,
it shows a complete lack of understanding of who he is.
the fundamental misunderstanding. I mean, the whole idea of the Torah's presentation of our relationship with Yahweh is he gets down on his knees to lift us up. It's he who we should see on his knees. And it's us that he desires to be on our feet. Now, he can do that. He can lift us up. We can't do that to him. So why don't we just accept it as it should be? Well, as we turn to the 5th chapter of Yahowah, it opens with a parable, that of a vineyard planted on a fertile hill, which is laid waste. It is a story of man uprooting what God has planted. The parable is then explained with Yahweh blaming the religious, namely Paul, specifically Paul, for corrupting what he has prepared. Then after revealing that the world at large has rejected his Torah, Yahweh lifts up a standard in a distant place for everyone to see. And that is where we were last week. I began with that standard. It's in the 26th statement of the 5th chapter of Yahowah, because it was apparent that the standard that Yahweh is lifting up is ours. Is our enthusiasm to share his testimony as accurately and completely as is possible. And there is no other viable option but for the fact that Yahweh is speaking about what we're doing. And particularly when you set it into the context of this banner being lifted up that is created in a far distant place. Oh, you can't get much further than in America.
Other side of the world.
Yeah, other side of the world. And that it's in the context of Shaul destroying the vineyard that God planted, which represents the house of Israel. And that his plague has caused the preponderance of people throughout the world to forget Yahweh's Torah. Well, that's what we're about. Exposing and condemning Paul. Awakening people to the fact that the Torah is Yahweh's guidance to humankind. And doing so by sharing his words. And so, in this past week, I've gone back to the beginning. I've now translated the whole of Yahowah 5, and I'm about a third of the way through, refining the commentary on it, and I thought we would cover it today, because I don't think there's anything we could actually talk about this evening where I wouldn't return to it. Kirk, you were spectacular as Professor Kirk on the migration and the promises made to the 12 tribes, if you will, of Israel. And yet almost everything you said reminded me of something I had just read in the 5th chapter of Yahowah.
They're all connected.
Yeah, they're all connected, and I guess there's a worse thing than to be enthused and excited about something that Yahweh has said, particularly as it pertains to...
that's a good thing. That's a
yeah,
very good thing.
Well, you're always best when you're talking about what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Correct. Now, there's a popular misconception that the stories presented in, I'll put in air quotes here, the Old Testament are myths, when they're in fact all historical presentations of what actually occurred, replete with dialogue, which is something that's missing from most all other ancient portrayals. Similarly, there is the perception that parables are the purview of the Christian Jesus and presented exclusively in the New Testament. And yet, in reality, Yahowah seldom, if ever, said anything that wasn't previously stated in Yahweh's Torah and Nambi. And as it turns out, he cited Yahowah 5 frequently and even deployed the same style, that of a storyteller. Now, as we've come to appreciate, the mashal, which are proverbs, are comprised of parables. But so are many of the mizmor, none more so than those owed to his shepherd, to Yahweh, in the 23rd Psalm. Even some of the personal histories presented in Bereshit and Genesis, while true, are conveyed as an author would present a story. including Adam, Noah, Abraham, Ishak, Jacob, and Joseph. The Exodus itself, culminating with the presentation of the tablets in the Torah, is conveyed in the manner of a good story, with the narrator setting the scene, introducing the characters, presenting the action as they take center stage, all while using stimulating dialogue to advance the plot. Words are used to paint pictures, which depict life with and without God. Now, we can relate to these individuals because, like us, they're all flawed. In the midst of ordinary lives, God intervenes. And these characters either do or they die, typically in spectacular fashion. These stories are fun to share. The lessons are straightforward and easy to remember. Many of these stories share a common element, because for all but the last 100 years, to survive, most of humanity worked the land either as farmers or shepherds. Not surprisingly, therefore, Yahweh's parables typically include allusions to crops and sheep. One of the most vivid of these is the one presented in Yada 5. This may be the only place where we find God singing. It is a song for his beloved, for Dod, but also for Yehudah and Yisrael, who are specifically mentioned, as is Dod by name. And while it begins on a high note, this is a sad song about unrequited love. It is what happens when we stop listening to God and start believing man instead. It begins, fellows, with Yahweh interrupting the ordinary flow of human events by making an announcement. And he's right in the midst of telling us the ills of religion and how his people destroyed their relationship with him because they chose to be religious. And in the midst of that, he interrupts and says, I want to sing a song. Yahweh knows he's about to enter the longest quiet period in the human experience, a time when almost no one would listen to him. Sure, he would seek out and find the rare individual willing to serve as a prophet over the next 2 centuries. But even this would be a horrible time for his children, as they would be slaved by Assyrians and then by Babylon. In the troubling days ahead, it would be difficult to remember the good times, the best of times. The reason the entire story is being told. God loves us, at least some of us. More than anyone in the long history of men, Dod was Yahweh's most beloved son. There has never been, and will never be, anyone whose company God enjoys more than Dod's. He was the ultimate conversationalist, articulate, and intellectually stimulating. There wouldn't be anyone even remotely like him for another 700 years. And even then, Yosha wouldn't be the same, as he is God talking to himself. And then nothing. No one to listen, and no one willing to share for nearly 2,000 years. That is the reason that Yahweh says, "Nah, please," before announcing his desire to sing. It has been a long, long time, even for God, since he had an audience. And now he wants us to know, even as we approach a time far worse than that of the Assyrian and Babylonian invasions, worse than being enslaved in Egypt, that this is a love story. It is the reason we exist. With that introduction, please, nah, it is my desire, out of a heightened sense of urgency, so I plead with you, desiring your attention, because I want to sing on behalf of my beloved a song to the one I dearly love, to Dode, concerning his vineyard. Let me share that with you again. I mean, it's just so, I guess it gives me goosebumps to think that the creator of the universe is saying, please, interrupting the flow of human events and saying, please, and then saying, I want to sing a song. And here is God telling us, I want to sing the song to Dode, my beloved. Please. It is my desire out of a heightened sense of urgency. So I plead with you, desiring your attention, because I want to sing. Here, let me sing as an expression of my will, using my voice as an instrument to convey the words and musical tones of this song. On behalf of my beloved, the one I dearly love, a song to the one I love, to Dode, concerning his vineyard. The grapes were planted, cultivated, and tended, all existing for him, for my beloved, to approach and draw near, by way of a sun, of gleaming light from a supernatural source on the Mount of Olives. That is Yeshayah 5:1. As I mentioned, it begins with na, please, a word few of us would put on God's lips. Who are we?
Let me ask you about please.
Yeah.
When I looked up, the only thing I've managed to do is 5:1. And when I looked up no, I'd done it before, but it was striking that 181 times it is translated please. It is a soft. Now, when you change that to all the Christian Bibles, they change it to now. Now it's like when you talk to a class, forcefully. As we're going to do this.
Yeah, autos is the Hebrew word for now. Behold, henna can mean now at this time. Behold, pay attention, right at this moment. Henna. And wah, the most common of all Hebrew conjunctions, which I think mostly serves as punctuation, can mean now, then, so, and also.
The little nuance differences.
Na does not mean now. The only thing that's now about na is, I'm pleading with you. This is really important. Please. Yeah. I beseech you. I don't want to use the term beg, but it's as close to beg as we can possibly ascribe to God.
But it's begging out of loving for someone. I'm please, child, don't do this. Or do this or something.
Right.
The whole thing's presented in volitional terms. It is his desire.
In fact, they
really want
I want you to want this.
Cohortative is the mood that the song is presented. Cohortative is first person volition. This is the will of God. He wants us to listen, and so he's asking us, please. And after 2,700 years of silence, of no one willing to listen, of no one willing to share, it's amazing that he would interrupt the flow of human events to say, please. And as I was about to say, who are we that he would say please to us?
Exactly.
And yet few words more accurately reveal Yahweh's character or explain the reason we exist. God not only wants to establish a relationship with us, he wants to get down on his knees to lift us up. He wants to raise us as his children. He has offered his hand, hoping that we would grasp hold and travel through life together. He wants to empower and enrich us so that we become ever more like him, able to walk side by side and talk face to face. A relationship which begins as creator with his creation is capable of becoming father and son. Please,
and I had that exact moment this afternoon when we got home from work. We always take our dog for a walk, and so Delenn's walking out there with us. And as soon as we get into the street, we always make her hold one of our hands. And I was exactly the words I said. Delenn, please hold Daddy's hand.
Yes.
Exact same thing. I'm trying to take care of her. I want to guide her and help her.
Yeah, we tell our granddaughter that please is the most empowering word in the entire language.
I think so.
It is an extraordinarily empowering word. Please. It's perfectly suited for families, just as we experience every day with our granddaughter, and just as you experience with your daughter. Please, the Creator God of the universe wants to sing a song to us about his love for Dowd.
Yeah, there's something that, every English translation, anyone reading an English translation would miss, is the connection between beloved here and Dowd. Yeah. Because you have no clue that Dowd, beloved is based on Dowd. Yeah, Dowd.
The Hebrew word that I translated beloved, that Kirk, you looked this up today, every single Hebrew lexicon says Dowd means beloved.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And Dowd just so happens to be named the name of the most important person in all of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms.
Right.
And yes, you're absolutely correct. If you didn't look at the Hebrew, you would not know that Yahweh was speaking about singing a song to Dowd, his beloved. You know why that is so powerful? Is that Dowd was flawed.
Terribly.
And yet Yahweh loved him. It tells us that the Mizmor, that songs that Dowd wrote, were exceedingly pleasing to God. That talking with and exchanging insights and ideas with Dowd was extremely pleasing to God. That Dowd's experience as a shepherd was extremely pleasing to God. It tells you that if we learn from Dowd, if we share Dowd's passion for Yahweh's Torah, for learning, for knowing, for understanding, for appropriately responding to Yahweh, to sharing Yahweh's message, for opposing Yahweh's opponents, if we do that, then Yahweh, who is consistent, will love us as well. By Yahweh singing a song to this man in particular, easily the most flawed man that plays a starring role throughout the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, we know for certain that Paul was a piece of crap. That his thesis, as presented in Galatians and in Romans, that the Torah cannot save because if you're guilty of violating one aspect of it, you're guilty of violating all of it, is utter and complete rubbish. There is no ode or song sung to Paul.
I was just thinking about this. It was interesting. You were talking earlier about the connections between Dowd and Yahusha. It's kind of interesting to me that, Dowd was immediately preceded by Shaul, and Yahusha was immediately followed by Shaul.
Yeah, I never put that together, but boy, is that ever true. Shaul is the bookends for the two branches.
Pretty good.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, that's amazing. Yahweh calls Dowd Yisrael's greatest singer and songwriter. His Mizmor songs are his legacy to all humankind. But he isn't the only singer and songwriter in this story. The covenant is a love story, one whose lyrics were composed by God. It is the greatest ballad of the Torah. All too often we hear people say that they are searching for the will of God. I find this surprising, indeed frustrating, because Yahweh has made his will known. He wants to sing us a love song. All he wants from us in return is to listen and respond. This is Dod's vineyard. It was conceived for him and tended by him. The same was true with Noah's Ark. God provided the instructions, and Noah did the work. The Torah is replete with captivating stories, profound teachings, marvelous invitations, and sound guidance. It was written by Moshe. And yet it is Dod who reveals how to apply it to our lives. The Torah is the message. Dod is the messenger. The Torah presents the way. Dod is the one to follow. The Torah shares, I should say the Torah is the invitation. Dod is the beneficiary. But he isn't selfish. His song exists to share what he has learned about God, so that we might come to understand who he is and what he is offering and follow him home. Just as we can jump aboard Noah's Ark and ride out the storms of life, we can pick up our hoes and shears and join Dod in his vineyard. We can pull the weeds, prune the wild tendrils, and help harvest the fruit, even enjoy the wine. Dod worked with God, as can we. Well, a vineyard is an interesting metaphor. Why a vineyard? You may wonder. What is it about grapes and wine that would have Yahweh use them as he does grain and bread, as well as olives and oil, to advance his story? I suspect that the answer lies in the common denominators. Each was conceived to bear fruit. And yet it must be cultivated by man to be productive. With each there is both the desirable fruit that is harvested and that which is discarded, whether that be stems, chaff, or pips. Each must be ground or pressed before it is useful, just as life's challenges develop character. Or perhaps more telling still, we must shed the limitations associated with the debilitating aspects of our physical nature before we are transformed into what God intended. When made correctly and consumed responsibly, wine is safer than drinking untreated water. But when abused and overused, it is a debilitating poison. You know, when I first wrote this morning, I wrote overused, and then I went back over and I deleted it. I said, oh, come on, you can't overuse the things of God. And I said, oh, certainly you can. Absolutely. In any relationship, you can be suffocated if that's all you have 24/7, if there's nothing else but being together all the time. Yes, we can overindulge, even when it comes to our relationship with God. The pattern of the seventh day was established for a reason. To remain interesting, especially to those we love, we must have time apart, time to achieve and explore, and then come back and share, thereby enriching everyone. Wine is the preferred beverage during feasts and celebrations, something Yahweh wants us to enjoy. And lastly, after being crushed and left on the skins, after being fermented with yeast, the fungus which represents sin, wine's deep red color is symbolic of the blood of the Passover lamb, serving as a reminder of what our Heavenly Father has done on behalf of his children. Similarly, grain in the form of unyeasted bread is central to matzah, just as olive oil serves as the most enlightening metaphor underlying the purpose of first fruits and the promise of the Shabbat. I didn't highlight it when I read this passage, but I'll go back to it now so you know what I'm referring to. It says again, please, I want to sing on behalf of my beloved to the one I dearly love, to Dode, concerning his vineyard. The grapes were planted, cultivated, and tended, all existing for him, for my beloved to approach and draw near, by way of a sun, Karen, of gleaming light from a supernatural source on the mount, with the blast of a trumpet on the summit of a mountain, radiating light from the verbal root Haran, to shine brightly, radiating rays of light, of olives, Shemen. That is Karen. It's not the first time that we have seen Karen. Yahweh told Abraham on Mount Moriah during the confirmation of the covenant that he would provide the Passover lamb. He used Karen to describe that lamb. Based upon its verbal root, Karen's primary connotation is to radiate light, shining brightly. Secondarily, Karen speaks of the summit of a mountain, in this case, the Mount of Olives. It is where the sun left Jerusalem and where Yahweh will return on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliation, the year 6000 Yah, sunset, October 2nd, 2033. He will do so exactly 4,000 years after his meeting on Mount Moriah with Abraham, 3,000 years after Dode laid the cornerstone for the family home on Moriah, and 2,000 years, 40 Yovel, a year slaves are freed, debt is forgiven, and land is returned, following Yahushua's departure after he had fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bukhurim, Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruits in 33 CE. Are you listening to Yahweh's love song? You recognize that yet another statement of Yahushua was not new, but reflected in the Torah and prophets. Remember, he said that he was going to come back the way that he left on the Mount of Olives. And it's right here in Yada Yahweh. Gleaming as light, he said he would return, looking as brilliant as constellations of stars. And here it is again, the sun gleaming and radiating light, coming back on the Mount of Olives. None of that, of course, is conveyed in your English translations, but it's all there. You just look at the Hebrew.
And I did. I was amazed. When I first looked on Korean, I said, but I got a hill, a peak on a mountain, a ray of light, power, a horn of power.
Yep, the King James. My beloved has a vineyard and a very fruitful hill.
Yep. You know how
fruitful hill, yeah, exactly.
There is an advantage of doing this a lot, and that is the moment I saw Karen, I said, oh my goodness, I know that word. That's a word you never forget, because I first encountered Karen during the fulfillment, the confirmation on Mount Moriah with Abraham and Yishak, when Yahweh says, don't harm the boy. I'm going to supply the lamb. And that lamb was described using Karen.
Yep.
Gleaming with light. Right there on the summit of Mount Moriah. Yeah, so you see it again, you say, oh my.
Could you get any more obvious with the linking here?
No, you couldn't. And, what does Yahweh say about understanding? You make connections. That's how you understand. How you go. First, you got to look at the words to know them, and then to make the connection. It was a profound moment. It's one of the reasons why I just said, okay, we're going to cover Yada Yahweh 5. I sent it to you guys in rough form this evening, because I just said, I can't avoid it. You read something like that, and it's just such a wow, such a motivation to share I think if you're part of the family, it's inevitable. You've got to do what Dode did. Share what you've come to know and understand, because you can't hold it in. So here now, I think we're all coming to appreciate the connection between the vineyard and the Passover wine. We're recognizing the connection between pressing grapes into wine and separating the desired result from the stems, the skins, and the seeds, with what occurred on yeasted bread. Do you see in these words that no greater love can be manifest by God than laying down the mortal life of his Son to save his beloved? You shared something from the King James. Personally, I do not know how the King James Bible changed Ben, son, to first.
There's no reference.
Really worked hard to do that.
You had to work hard to do that. But, I'm sure they did it because they were translating. They weren't translating. They were remodeling of the Geneva Bible and the Bishop Bible, and they were translated from the Latin Vulgate, and the Latin Vulgate was a translation of the Old Latin texts, which were in fact translations of the Septuagint. So we're a very long way from Hebrew, and so who knows what Ben might have been changed to in Greek or Old Latin or the Latin of the early days of Roman Catholicism. But I know what Ben means. Ben is one of the most common words in the Hebrew lexicon. Ben has but one meaning, and it is a
son.
A male child. It's a son. Ben is a male child, the offspring of a parent, a descendant. Likewise, shemin means olive and olive oil.
Yeah, anointing oil.
While it can mean grow, it does not mean very fertile either. And yet, the King James published, "Now I will sing to my well-beloved a song of my beloved touching his vineyard. My well-beloved hath a vineyard and a very fruitful hill."
But it's from shemin, to grow, to become, to shine. Oh.
Yeah. Lakat is the
way you use the oil for
touch. Yeah, the Hebrew word for touch. It's not to be found in this text.
Yeah.
The New International Version concurred somewhat. "I will sing for the one I love a song about his vineyard. My loved one has a vineyard on a fertile hillside." The New American Standard Bible was so similar it does not bear repeating. But the New Living Non-Translation tried. Now,
no longer living?
Yeah, no longer living. No longer a translation. How about that? No longer a translation.
No longer a translation.
Yeah, NLT. No longer a translation.
No longer translating. We're just making this up as we go.
No longer translating. Yeah, we're offering our own book because we think we're smarter than God. "Now I will sing for the one I love a song about his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a rich and fertile hill." By misrepresenting the words God chose to sing. By the way, the Nilt has no excuse. Masoretic text, fully available to the translators, the Leningrad Codex.
They have everything at their fingertips that we have, and then some.
Yeah, you know what's something that's interesting about Yahshua 5, and I want to interject here. I haven't put it into the chapter yet. There were lots and lots of discrepancies between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Masoretic text and Yahshua 5. Not one of them material. But in virtually every case, the Masoretic text made more sense, was more consistent than was the Great Isaiah Scroll. And what we should recognize is that the scribe that wrote the Great Isaiah Scroll, I'm sure he was diligent. I'm sure he did his best, but he was flawed. Occasionally he misspelled words. Occasionally he ascribed, and the biggest differences were beyond whether or not the conjugation was there or not, which is immaterial because they're typically just punctuation anyway, was whether or not, or what mood was ascribed, or what stem was ascribed to a verb. Really, really insignificant kinds of things. And so this is one of those times where I think the Masoretic is actually superior. You know, when the scribe was writing Yahweh 5, he just had a bad day. I've had bad days. I've had good days. Today was a great day. But I've had days that weren't so good. And so throughout this, while I've checked the Great Isaiah Scroll and found that there were lots of differences, they were all extraordinarily small. And when the differences...
I'm looking at it now, and yeah, there's a lot of them, but they're all very minor.
They're really minor. They're all in form.
Actually seem like 4 already that just say misspelled. Like the Isaiah Scroll was misspelled.
Yeah, it was misspelled. Now, the point I was going to make, though, is that the Nilt had no excuse, because the Leningrad Codex of the Masoretic text is really quite good. And it was available to them. It was not available to those that conceived the King James. In fact, there was no even remotely accurate Hebrew text available when the King James was being compiled. But with the Nilt there was. And with the Nilt there was the Dead Sea Scrolls, so they could check the veracity of one against the other. Now, by misrepresenting the words, God chose to sing the profound and prophetic lyrics to this song, and his extraordinary message became meaningless. As was the case with Noah, with Abraham, and Daud, Yahweh's beloved engaged, doing what God wants done. It was a relationship they were establishing and enjoying, after all. Speaking of Daud, Yahweh's beloved, it says, he loosened the dirt, tilled its soil, and removed the weeds. Azak. He cleared away the sod from it with the proper implement and prepared its ground for cultivation. He cleared it of stones, removed the stones of death used for capital punishment. This isn't the typical Hebrew word for stone. This is kakal. In fact, I'd never seen it used before. And he planted it, placed the seeds, and embedded the rootstock with the best vines, with the choicest and most highly valued grapevines. He built, this is Ghana, he constructed on behalf of the family and son, Migdal. Migdal can be a watchtower for the observant, a chest or ark for storing something important, a podium on an elevated stage for conveying a message. It's from Yadal, the verbal root, meaning regarding empowering and magnifying growth. So he built a watchtower, or a chest and ark for storing something important, or a podium on an elevated stage in the middle of it. In addition, he carried out a wine press and vat. He carved out a wine press and vat in it. Okay, guys, I'm going to ask you a question here. If Daud did as Yahweh said, cleared it of stones and planted, he built, constructed on behalf of the family and son, a migdal, a raised platform that would properly position a chest or ark that was used as a stage to convey a message. Are you aware of any such platform in the area that Daud lived?
Well, the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, the Ark of the Covenant is what was stored on that platform. What is the platform called? Who did he buy it from?
Oh, from
the Temple Mount, isn't it? It's called the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
He bought the platform from Aruna, the Jebusi, the Yabusi. It's a raised platform, isn't it, for conveying a message. It's the place where the chest is presented. It's the place for the observant. That's what he's talking about here. Right in the midst of it. And then, in addition, he carved out, cut, and engraved a wine press and vat. Then he confidently anticipated that it would produce clusters of grapes. But after all of this effort, it yielded sour and rotten grapes, hard, unpalatable, unripe, worthless, loathsome and stinking, odious and abhorrent fruit.
That's so sad.
For a vineyard to grow and to be productive, the ground must be made receptive, opened up to allow water and nutrients to reach the roots. This serves as a metaphor for open and receptive vines. And for the new vines to receive the light required to produce good fruit, the weeds must be removed as well. This is symbolic of eliminating religious and political mandates. Now, there are a variety of Hebrew words denoting rocks, stones. Sewer is the most common. But this one tells a story. The stones Dode removed, according to the lyrics of God's song, were those used to end the lives of those found in violation of the Torah. That's profound.
I thought that was very telling. That was profoundly, something you would completely miss in any English translation.
Correct. These weren't sewer, just ordinary stones. These were the rocks that were thrown to end the lives of those who were in violation of the Torah.
You know, I had logos up as I was reading through that this afternoon, and that was the first thing that caught me when I looked at that. I was like, wow, that's interesting that it's speaking of stoning. And like, well, that's very unique, well, not unique, but interesting in that being used in this context.
Thanks to Dode, the stones that would be used to end the lives of those who were in violation of the Torah were being cast aside. The removal of these stones, therefore, foreshadows the purpose of Passover. Really powerful, insightful.
And like I said, that was literally the first thing I noticed. It is like the first definition of the word. And it's not like you had to dig and find. You know, it wasn't one of those, like sometimes you have where it's like way off. It's like you find this little nuance of the word, and it's like, oh, that fits so much better, but it's, you know, kind of tricky to find. This was right there. How anyone missed it, I don't get.
Right there in your face. But the challenge then isn't to properly define the word. It's to understand why the word was chosen.
Yeah.
What was Dode doing? Why is the story of him tossing away the stones of death so telling? Well, what he was doing is he was eliminating the method, the consequence, if you will, the implement that would be used to end the lives of those who were guilty. They would now live. Passover.
The whole purpose of Passover.
Absolutely. Mana happens to be the feminine of son. You won't find that in the lexicon, but BN is son. BN is Bayeth Nun. Bayeth is drawn as a picture of a family home, and Nun is drawn as a sperm. And the ending, which is at the end of a word, it's a person standing up, reaching up to God, makes the word feminine. Bena is the feminine of son. It conveys the idea of building a family home. In this regard, it's important to recognize that family and home are from Bayeth, which is also feminine, as is Bereth, covenant. Underscoring this thought, Yahweh will eventually reveal that this vineyard is actually the home of Yisrael. There are a number of ways to accurately convey the meaning of Migdal. As a watchtower, it is a place for the observant to examine and consider what they see. As a chest or ark, it is symbolic of the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat, comprising our access to the Almighty and our seat by His side. And as a podium set upon an elevated stage, it serves as a means for us to stand up and inform those who would listen to God's song. More important, put all these things together. In proximity to Dode, this is the Temple Mount. When we listen to Yahweh's instructions and act upon them, as Dode had done, we can confidently anticipate beneficial results. Those who accept the conditions of the covenant and act upon them will live eternally with God, just as he has promised. Unfortunately, rather than listen to Yahweh's song, rather than capitalize upon what he has done, some men neglected and others uprooted Dode's vineyard, planting the wild and worthless vines of religion in its place, such as the Roman temple to Venus, the Dome of the Rock, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the al-Aqsa Mosque, to name a few. They and those that would worship within them are ba'ash, loathsome and abhorrent. Bad fruit. Man's most elaborate edifices to his religious gods are unpalatable and odious to Yahweh. As we discussed just a moment ago, there is an interesting connection between the three types of food Yahweh uses to convey his purpose and plan. Grapes, olives, and grain must all be crushed to produce the desired result: wine, olive oil, and bread. Just as Yahweh allowed Yosha's body and soul to experience the impact of Roman whips and Sheol's enormous pressure to redeem us, we gain character when we endure life's challenges. And in the crucible of life, that which is valuable emerges and is cherished, while the stems, the pits, the good result is gathered in by God, while the rest dries up and is blown away. Moreover, just as we have read, there is good and bad fruit. Now, speaking of rotten, think for a moment about the current inhabitants of Jerusalem. The city, which is about the same size it was when originally sacked by the Romans in 70 CE, is home to 10% of Israel's total population. The most contentious place on earth is claimed by Jews, Muslims, Christians, and secular humanists. Of the 850,000 inhabitants living within the Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and Armenian quarters, over 500,000 are Jewish, 200,000 of whom are secular and 300,000 ultra-Orthodox. Now, that is not true if you go to Tel Aviv, which is Israel's largest city, where the preponderance of the people are secular and very few are religious. 350,000 of the 850,000 are Muslim, and a tiny fraction are Christians. It's interesting to note that the birth rate amongst Jewish women of 3 children each is the highest in the developed world. And of course, it is by far the most religious place in Israel. Over the past 4,000 years, Jerusalem has been under the control of the Canaanites, the Egyptians, the Jebusites. Dode and Solomon as the capital of Yahudah, the Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Macedonians, Romans, Byzantines, and Sassanids, followed by the Islamic caliphates of the Umayyads, Abbasids, and Fatimids, the Seljuk and Ayyubid empires, Mamluk Sultanate, the Ottomans, and the British under their mandate. Jordan briefly, and now as part of Israel following the Six-Day War in 1967. Boy, that's a lot of people treading on that vineyard. Today, perhaps, and in fact even for the past 2,700 years, Yahweh is asking us to think about what he has said and Dowd has done, where they have done it, and why they have said it. This is a referendum between the religions of man and a relationship with God. He says, so now, inhabitants of Jerusalem and people of Yehudah, I implore you, please, to judge, electing to distinguish Shabbat by making the appropriate connections by-in between me and my vineyard, responding thoughtfully and appropriately by-in. Yashayah, salvation is from Yah, Isaiah 5:3. Yes, now I made a point earlier of the fact that Dowd was presented by Yahweh in the context of this being his vineyard, Dowd's vineyard. And now Yahweh is calling it his own. But isn't Dowd's home Yahweh's home? Weren't the lyrics of Dowd's songs inspired by God? Aren't they members of the same covenant family? Isn't this vineyard planted on Moriah under signs which read Zion? Isn't Dowd living with Yahweh now? Said another way, when we translate Yahweh's testimony as we are doing here, the words are both ours and his. When we do it right, there's no distinction between them.
Isn't that a marvelous
It isn't. Yeah, isn't that an amazing thought?
Ours and his. Wow.
Yeah, yes. I was beginning to think, well, this was Dowd's vineyard, and now it is Yahweh's vineyard. Change. And I said, no, he didn't change. When we do it right, which Dowd was declared right, Sadak, by Yahweh, so we know we did it right, there's no distinction between our words and Yahweh's words, our actions and Yahweh's actions, our family and Yahweh's family, what belongs to him and what belongs to us. That is the inheritance of the covenant, the promise of the Torah. It is indeed telling that the Jews who now live in Jerusalem are called Yashab. They're called settlers. Isn't that what the world is wont to call them? It is indeed telling that man is wont to call the land which surrounds them Palestine, when Yahweh, who just happens to be God, says that it is Yehudah. That is why Yahweh is encouraging us to think about his story at this time. He's only indirectly asking us to differentiate between God and man, having chosen to make the initial referendum between he and his vineyard. So shouldn't we be thinking about how they differ and how they are alike? What is the distinction between Yahweh and his vineyard? Well, God began by revealing that the vineyard was an expression of his love, and that he established it for his beloved, Dowd. He told us that out of this vineyard, the Son of Light would emerge, one branch to another, in connection with the Mount of Olives, symbolic of the set-apart Spirit. He then explained how he worked with Dowd to till the land and make it receptive, to remove the weeds that would have competed with the vines, and to cast aside the deadly stones, all before planting the finest grapes. He and Dowd did so on Moriah, as part of Zion, in anticipation of achieving the desired result. But man got in the way, and the grapes soured. So how does that differ from God, you may wonder? And the answer is, it does not differ at all, at least in the beginning, only in the end. It is a lovely story when Yahweh and Dowd are engaged, working together to prepare and produce the perfect environment, a garden, if you will, to live and to grow together. It is a garden without weeds of deceit or the stones of death. It is a garden akin to Eden. But alas, man has free will. He can choose to listen to God's love song or sing along or comprise an entirely different tune, compete with him. Most men have done the latter. And the proof is in the harvest. You'll note that we came to this realization by listening to what Yahweh said, and then making the most appropriate connections after careful deliberation. We sought to transition from aware to knowing, and then from knowing to understanding, all using the prescribed method by God, the end. Revealing that we were right, Yahweh asks a question. With free will serving as the underpinning of all loving relationships, could God have done more without making a mockery of the entire experience? Said another way, it isn't God's love, His instructions, or His personal involvement that have been inadequate. It's man's failure to care, to listen, to engage that are at fault. Otherwise, why would God ask, what more could I have done in my vineyard that I have not done with it? What is the reason I looked forward with anticipation that it would produce good grapes, but there are sour and rotten grapes?
That is so sad.
In one way, it is awesomely sad. What more could I have done? He asks.
Very revealing, though. He did it all.
I want to think about it the other way. Here's the creator of the universe, and he's asking us a question about the single most important thing to God. And he respects us to the point that he's willing to ask us, what more could I have done? Unless he had profound respect for our capacity to think, to reason, to know, to understand, it would have been preposterous for him to ask that question. So on one hand, you might say, this is incredibly sad that God is lamenting. What more could I have done? But I don't think he's asking a question at all. I think instead he's encouraging us to think and giving us credit for being able to think and to say, could he have done more? Should he have done more? We're talking about the single most important aspect of the human experience. What did God do to make it possible for us to know him and engage in a relationship with him? Was his plan adequate? Was it appropriate? Could it have been improved? That's the question he's asking.
It has to be, because you still get back to the same principle of free will. There's a limit to what he can do without control.
Correct.
And he never crosses that line. He's done everything.
Correct.
He's presented you with the words. He's presented you with a teacher, face to face. He's provided everything. He's lived up to every agreement he's given you. Us.
Is the fact that God's anticipation that it would produce good grapes, and yet there are sour and rotten ones, is it God's fault or is it man's?
It's always man's fault.
It's the ultimate life and death question, isn't it?
No.
Let's ponder for a moment what Yahweh has done on our behalf. He created the ultimate landscape for our amusement, a six-dimensional universe for us to explore, replete with hundreds of billions of galaxies, each averaging hundreds of billions of stars, even the perfect planet of the ideal size and composition, orbiting the perfect distance from one of them. He created life for us to enjoy, with eyes to see, ears to hear, mouths to eat and talk, hands to do, legs to stand upright, feet to walk, and brains to process it all, while we experience everything along the way. He provided us with a neshama so that we could exercise good judgment and reason between good and bad. That he put us in a garden, perfectly suited to our needs, so that we could enjoy one another's company. And he gave us free will, so that we would be neither robots nor toys, neither subjects nor slaves. When we ignored his instructions regarding how to live with him in the garden, he provided a way back home. Not only having laid out every step along the way in his Torah, he himself did what was required for us to become immortal and perfect children of God, enriched and empowered. Had he done anything more, there'd be no purpose of free will. And all he expected of us in return was to listen to what he was offering and capitalize upon it by engaging in a relationship with him. But evidently, it was too much to ask, at least for most men. So now, please, choose to let me explain and make known what I will do regarding my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it will be purged, grazed, and set ablaze. Its protective stone wall will be broken down and breached, and it shall be trampled down and tread upon. If you're making the proper connections in accord with Yahweh's instructions, you now realize that he is predicting what Imperial Rome and then the Roman Catholic Church would do, and now have done, and Jerusalem. Imperial Rome broke through the walls of Jerusalem twice, in 70 CE and then again in 133. On the first occasion, they tore down the family home known as the Temple of Yahweh, stone by stone, leaving nothing but a pile of rubble. Then in Daniel, we read that out of the viciousness of Rome will emerge a beast that will tread upon the entire world, trampling it underfoot. The Roman Catholic Church. What Yahweh has planted, men trample down. Yes, the stones were tossed aside and breached, and then the garden was trampled down. This is Imperial Rome, followed by the Roman Catholic Church, the two most vicious beasts ever to haunt humankind. Yahweh is free to work, or mankind, I should say, is free to work with God as Dode chose to do, or against him, as was Shaul's decision. One choice leads to life, the other to death. One to a productive harvest, the other to thorny briars and twisted brambles. God says, I shall lay it open. I shall place it such that it is susceptible to becoming a desolate wasteland, being wasted and destroyed. It will not be pruned. The superfluous vines will not be cut away, nor will it be weeded, or cultivated, plowed, or hoed. And it shall raise up, Allah. It will exalt Allah and offer up briars, brambles, and thorns. And concerning the clouds, I will direct the rain away from it. It's a waste of a garden, isn't it? Weeds, representing man's way, choke out the life of God's way. And an unpruned garden is an unproductive garden. As for whether Yahweh intended to say Allah would be exalted in this place, as is the case, or that briars, brambles, and thorns would be raised instead of grapes, or both, is subject to conjecture. But there is no question that Jerusalem was once far more lush than the desert we find today. Also thought-provoking, Shaul, the villain of this story, mentioned by name in due time, once bragged that his ego was so out of control, the thorn in his side was none other than one of Satan's demons. Now, I do find it humorous that Yahweh said that Allah would be exalted in this place. Because what sits there?
Well,
Two moths and a shrine.
Home of the hoofy print.
The dove of the hoofy print. Yep. Allah would be exalted in that place. Should anyone have wondered what the vineyard representative Yahweh wants us to rest assured that, well, he is not talking about grapes. The vineyard of Yahweh, of the vast array of spiritual implements, Shabbat, is the home of Yisrael. And the individuals comprising Yahudah are the most delightful and satisfying aspect of his garden. Well, that's something that's quite interesting, because Dode built a home. Well, he compiled everything and bought the foundation and prepared it, and his son Solomon established the home of Yahweh. As a matter of fact, we're told in earlier chapters of Yashayah that Yahweh himself will establish his home on the highest peak of Mount Moriah. And now we're being told that this vineyard is the home of Yisrael, and its most cherished personages are none other than Yahudah. What tribe was Dode from?
Yahudah.
How about Yahusha?
Yahudah.
What about, in what part of Israel is Jerusalem?
In the heart.
When Yahweh divorced himself of Ephraim, the 10 northern tribes, he didn't divorce himself of Yehudah, did he?
No.
Yehudah means related to Yah. They were, and they will always be, the chosen people. Yahweh is speaking of them now in this prophecy. The vineyard of Yahweh, of the vast array of spiritual implements, is the home of Yisrael, and the individuals comprising Yahudah are his most delightful and satisfying aspect of his garden. He expected and looked forward to the exercise of good judgment, but behold, there are violent acts, egregious injustices, and a wanton outpouring of blood at the hands of governments and aristocrats. Rather than vindication, justice, and prosperity, behold, there's a crying out for help. For the two terms that are juxtaposed here, mishpat, which is the exercise of good judgment, rational thought, and reasonable decision, even a means to resolve disputes justly, is compared to mishpak, extraordinarily similar word. It speaks of violent acts, egregious injustices, a wanton outpouring of blood at the hands of government and aristocrats, a complete disregard for the Torah, and an irrational breach of the covenant by many people and nations, along with an outpouring of blood. It's from kapach, to join together, to smite and to strike, leaving an ugly, erupting lesion and a malignant scab and tumor.
Now, how telling is that? You look back over history, how much violence has been carried out in God's name, quoting his word, citing his word out of context to justify it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know, something that he put there for good purpose has been just so misused and abused.
Until the last 100 years, the preponderance of bloodletting and violence was the residue of religion.
Most from those who got their authority errantly from the Torah. Yeah, right. Indirectly, they claimed it as their basis of authority.
Yeah, even the Quran claims that it errantly, that it confirms the Torah. And in the first 100 years of Islam, they decimated half the planet's population. Now,
even
in the last 100 years, there has been
his authority.
In the last 100 years, there has been a dogma. I spoke of them at the last program. Antifa is now the the malignant tumor of this dogma, the religion of man, socialist secular humanism, communism. But it is socialist secular humanism, communism, as man as God, that is the most deadly influence on the planet today. It is the dogma of Hitler, of Stalin, of Mao, Pol Pot, of the fat, ugly hair boy of North Korea. And 100 million people have succumbed to it. So rather than vindication and prosperity, behold, there is a crying out for help. God's covenant family was to be rooted in the promised land. They were to be productive and flourish, serving as an example for the whole world to follow. That's what you discovered as you did your research this past 2 weeks, Kurt.
Yes, sir.
Israel and Yahowah were to grow together with God in the most satisfying and enjoyable relationship imaginable. This was to be Eden. Based upon what he was offering, predicated upon what he had done, there was every reason to expect favorable results. After all, who in their right mind would turn down an offer from God, one in which we sacrifice nothing and gain everything in return? Yahweh,
$60,000 question.
It is, isn't it? Yahweh naturally expected that his creation would be capable of exercising good judgment. He had personally designed our brains and given us his neshama, the means to be rational, to discriminate between good and bad, right and wrong. But he obviously thought more of us than we thought of ourselves, valued us more highly than we valued ourselves. He trusted us more than we should have been trusted. But such is the nature of every loving relationship. We see the best in those we love. So did Yahweh. In Mishak, we see the opposite of Mishpat, which is why they are being contrasted. To Mishpat is to do the right things for the right reasons. It is to exercise good judgment to resolve disputes. To Mishbach is to do the worst things for the worst possible reasons. Rather than vindicate, the Mishbach condemn. Rather than encourage rational thought, the Mishbach indoctrinate. Rather than save lives, the Mishbach destroy them. Rather than reconcile relationships, the Mishbach shatter them. These are the things of man that God detests. This concludes with a prediction that is not yet materialized, although there have been constant foreshadowings. Jews cried out for help when they were enslaved by the Egyptians, when besieged by the Assyrians, when attacked by the Babylonians, when assaulted by the Romans, when persecuted under the Catholic Church, when brutalized during the Holocaust, and now under the constant barrage of Islamic terrorism. But this is now a collective cry for help, one coming directly out of Jerusalem, in Yahudah, in the heart of Israel. Something terrible is about to happen. And God's going to share that with us in a moment. Now, I suspect after reading over 1,000 pages of observations for our time, or listening to them, as many of you have as part of the audience of this program, that you're aware that the process that I have deployed from the very beginning continues to be translate Yahweh's words as accurately and completely as possible by closely examining and carefully considering each of them. Contemporaneously, I've striven to delineate why these words may have been chosen, how they may have been used elsewhere, and what they may convey beyond that which can be reasonably included in the translations themselves. Then I will reread them and recite the translations to myself, reflecting on what God has revealed, so that I might come to appreciate what Yahweh was saying and why he is saying it, and how it applies to our lives in the here and now. After sharing these insights, I'd like to return to his words, bringing them together in summary fashion. hoping that the repetition helps etch Yahweh's message into our memory. So here are the first 7 statements of Yeshaya chapter 5. Please, it is my desire out of a heightened sense of urgency. And so I plead with you, desiring your attention because I want to sing as an expression of my heartfelt desire, using my voice as an instrument to convey the words and musical tones of this song on behalf of my beloved, a song to the one I dearly love, to Daud, concerning his vineyard. The grapes were planted, cultivated, and tended, all existing for him, for my beloved, to approach and to draw near by way of a sun radiating light from a supernatural source on the Mount of Olives. He loosened the dirt, he tilled the soil, he removed the weeds, he cleared it of stones, and planted it with the best vines. He built on behalf of the family and son a watchtower for the observant, a chest for storing important things safely, and a podium on an elevated stage for conveying a message regarding empowering and magnifying growth in the middle of it. In addition, he carved out and engraved a wine press and vat in it. Then he confidently anticipated the good and beneficial result that it would produce, clusters of grapes. But after all of this effort, it yielded sour and rotten grapes, hard and unpalatable, unripe and worthless, loathsome and stinking, odious and abhorrent fruit. So now at this point in the story, inhabitants who have settled in Jerusalem and people of Yahudah, please, I implore you to judge, electing to distinguish by making appropriate connections between me and my vineyard, responding thoughtfully and appropriately after closely examining the evidence, making the proper connections, and after careful consideration. What more, what additionally, or subsequently, even now, could I have done in my vineyard that I have not accomplished with it? What is the reason I looked forward with the anticipation that it would produce good grapes? But there are sour and rotten grapes, hard and unpalatable, unripe and worthless, loathsome and stinking, odious and abhorrent fruit. So now, henceforth, as a result, please, I am beseeching you, allow me to explain and make known to you what, as a result of the relationship and by association, I will do regarding my vineyard. I will remove and take away its hedge to keep others out, and it will be purged, grazed, and set ablaze. Its protective stone wall will be broken down and breached, and its stones toppled and scattered by hostile invaders, and it shall be trampled down and tread upon. I shall lay it open and susceptible to becoming a desolate wasteland. It will not be pruned, nor will it be weeded, and it shall rise up those who exalt Allah, in addition to offering up briars, brambles, and thorns. And concerning all of the clouds, I will direct the rain away from it. The vineyard of Yahowah, of the vast array of spiritual implements, is the home of Yisrael. And the individuals of Yahudah are his most delightful and satisfying part of his garden. He expected and looked forward to the exercise of good judgment, rational thought, and reasonable decisions. But behold, now there are violent acts of egregious injustice and wanton outpouring of blood at the hands of governments and aristocrats, along with a complete disregard for the Torah and an irrational breach of the covenant by many people and nations. Rather than vindication, justice, and prosperity, now at this time, there's a crying out for help. It was indeed a song of unrequited love. This, fellows, is not the end of the song. No. It is just the beginning. We're only 7 statements in to a song that has 4 or 5 essential parts. The next part of this song, and we'll cover it next week, calls out Shaul by name, blames him for what is happening here. Following that, there's the consequence of Pauline Christianity, which is, and even Rabbinic Judaism, that the Torah is now overlooked, it's neglected, it's forgotten. And that is what has led to this horrible state of affairs. In the end, what we find is that, the fourth stanza, if you will, is that Yahweh has not given up on his people, nor his vineyard. And so he raises a standard, a signal, a sign, in a faraway place, and supports it, and he goes into considerable detail to describe the nature of that banner and those who would raise it. It's us. After 2,700 years, he found someone, us, willing to listen to it, who would enjoy his song and share it with the world over.
But if that's the criteria, we certainly do that. I don't know anybody in the group that we talk to constantly in the Covenant family and all the way across the world where they don't just absolutely love this stuff. They're in love with the Torah.
Two people.
Well, the Torah
Immediately
lovers
after immediately after a show last week, I got 2 letters. One was from D.
Oh, I like that.
Who was, it was. I shared it with a lot of you, which was deeply moving about how profoundly exciting it was to recognize that there's no question about it. Yahweh speaking about us. And, we don't say that boastfully. There's no reason to boast. Yahweh only works through flawed implements, so to qualify, you have to be unqualified. But what a pleasure it is to be a dented and dulled implement in the hands of God. And the other was from one of my favorite people in the world, from another Dode, this one in New Zealand, who said, there's no question about it. We are who he is talking about. What an honor, what a thrill. The best of all places to possibly be. He said, of all of the programs that we have done over these 10 to 15 years, that nothing shook him more to his core, resonated more deeply with him, was more profoundly important to him than this presentation, which we shared briefly a week ago, that has led to today's program and will be tomorrow's and a week from now. So, fellas, I want to thank you for putting up with me as I moved away from continuing to explain the history of Bible translation, something we need to do because it really clears the way to open people's minds to being receptive to what Yahweh has to say. But I very seldom encountered anything that was as captivating as this song.
This is remarkable. Great stuff. Nice.
Yeah.
Exciting. I'm with Dode on this one.
Yeah, I'm with Dode on this one. In fact, it's hard for me even to read parts of this without getting weepy-eyed. But it's not a sad weepy. It's really an exciting.
It's just moving.
Moving. Yeah, it's moving. This is really moving. And I even see the saddest parts of this as uplifting. And for God to say, what more could I have done? Well, he knows the answer.
Well, it shows how much he cares.
It shows not only how much he cares, but how much he respects our feedback. Yeah. How much he values our ability to think. It's a profoundly complex thought. And for us even to have it posed to us, it just screams that Yahweh gives us far more credit than we give ourselves. Yeah. We're capable, far more capable than we we think. And it's so sad that so many people stoop to believe a religion thoughtlessly when God gave us the capacity, the capability to reason, to be rational, to think. And all of this profound information to process.
He enjoys it.
Not a lot of times, fellas, that I have seen something where thinking in Hebrew, reading in Hebrew, made such a difference.
Yeah.
This is really close to being gibberish in English Bible translations.
Oh, that's no lie. You wouldn't even know it. That's what they're talking about.
Wouldn't even know what you're talking about.
No.
No. And some words like the juxtaposition of the two of being derelict versus being vindicated, right versus wrong. That's profound. The whole thing is just the fact that there were the stones of death that were being tossed aside.
Yeah, that was really special. Well,
yeah. Yeah. Or the fact that this talked about the two attacks of Rome, Imperial Rome and the Roman Catholic Church. The one that breached the walls and toppled the stones of the temple, and the other that, as Yahweh said and Daniel, would tread upon the whole world. And he uses the same exact verb. Or that you're reading about what's going to come from this garden, going to branch out from it, and you see Karen, the same word that Yahweh used to describe the Passover lamb in the story where he and Abraham and Yishak and Yahusha were meeting on Mount Moriah. Yeah, God gives us a lot of credit. There's just no question that he provided all of this knowing 2,700 years ago that we would find it, cherish it, share it.
Well, we appreciate how hard you work to get these things. You're so fast. I mean, it took a whole day to do one verse. Since the other day you did 12. And the commentary. That's great.
Well, I have never experienced any chapter coming together faster than this, and there is nothing harder to translate than Yahshua. I said, I think I shared with you earlier that I use the same, word processing program, Word, that everybody uses, and it has an active dictionary, and if a word's not in the active dictionary, it puts a red squiggly line under it. And, I've spent 10 years now translating Hebrew. It's not very often that I would come across a word that I haven't seen before that I didn't put into my active dictionary. So, in Yahshua, in this song, 75% of the words were new.
I'll say the one place I've noticed where I get a lot of that is with the Psalms. Because of the nature of the songs and the way it's done, you do tend to see a lot of words there that you don't see otherwhere.
Yeah, there's a lot in Dode's Psalms and in Yosha's song here, Yahweh's song here.
Yeah.
Where words
which makes sense because
have very similar sounds but entirely different meanings, or words that have similar sounds and similar meanings but from a different perspective are written in proximity to one another, to give a sense of rhyme, a sense of rhyme in the Hebrew style and rhythm to the message, so that it would sound, this song would sound as beautiful as its message. So there's lots of words that are precisely chosen for their sound and for their shading, such as the case with the. There's also a school of thought. I'm not musically inclined enough to do it. I know there's people that have recognized, particularly in the Psalms, that the notes are actually provided by the letters.
I've heard that.
And so you can recreate the melody of the Psalms through the letters. Music basically is a mathematical code. There's various frequencies of the wavelengths of the various notes. So yeah, it's supposed to be presented there. I'm simple enough that I'm just going to cherish the meaning of the words, and I'll wait to hear God sing it. I'll wait to hear Dode sing it. And I'm hoping. Well, I love listening to a good song, well sung, particularly ballads, and this is a ballad. Particularly love songs. I'm hoping that my diction will improve and that I will not be tone deaf any longer.
I think he'll give you that. I hope.
I hope.
I'm okay with sitting on the side playing the instruments while other people do the singing.
Yeah, I'd like to play more than about 4 notes on a guitar, too. So.
I wouldn't mind just listening, but, I'd love to be a participant. But, what this means, by the way, for Yahowah singing and Dode singing, and for us enjoying a good glass of wine, it does mean that from time to time, we are going to E equals MC squared. We're going to take physical form. We're going to slow and down time and enjoy a moment. Taste, food, song, dance, warmth. And I think that's going to happen on a certain cadence throughout eternity. I even think that in eternity, that this is going to be very much like the Shabbat plan, where we are going to go off 6 days. How long a day is irrelevant. We're going to go off 6 days, and we're going to go explore together, and then we're going to come back. Yahowah's not going to spend every moment with us, nor are we going to spend every moment with him. He's not going to suffocate us. He's going to want us to go off and explore and have a good time, and then come back and share it. And sometimes he'll go with us. Yeah. He's not limited in the number of people he can go out with, the things that he can do. But, it's just the nature of a good relationship. I think that's...
So Yahowah's not going to be a helicopter parent?
No, I think it's going to be the same cadence of 6 plus 1. That's what I think.
I think that sounds like a great plan.
Yeah, I think it's a marvelous plan. We'll get together for the 7 feasts every year. We'll get together on the 7th day as however time unravels.
Yeah.
Then it flows, and
if you come across something you really think is awesome, you can share it, or something you really don't understand and want to, you can ask for clarification.
Correct.
Like, hey,
going to be limited.
I saw this.
Yeah.
What's up with this? How's this work? This is interesting.
Right. But keep in mind, he's going to put within our nature a copy of his instructions and guidance.
So we should be able to reason it
Torah.
out.
We should. We're going to be powerful and enlightened. And we're going to be operating with the Creator's instructions. As a matter of fact, in just over 1,000 years, we're actually going to be witnesses to a new creation.
Yeah.
I think even participants.
I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, I don't see why he wouldn't let you play with his great toys.
I don't see. Yeah, that's exactly right. We're his children, and the universe is his collection of toys. That's for our amusement. The universe was created for our amusement.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I look forward to this next week. It is a beautiful picture.
Sounds good.
No, it's a sad song, but it in so many ways. It begins beautifully, and I think it ends beautifully.
Well, that's the way most of the stories do. And then there's the consequence, and then don't worry, some of you, I'll come back.
Yeah.
I
even think it ends with this, to the greatest extent the words allow, a description of a personal turboprop airplane, and how that is a toy and implement that is used in the conveyance of this story. So, I think this is profoundly important material. And you know something? Even if there's someone, none of us would be jealous in the slightest if this is prophetic of someone else, and that there's someone else far away from Jerusalem that's going to confront, expose, and condemn Shaul as the plague of death, and that's going to bring everyone's attention to how important it is to use the Torah guidance, and it's going to be devoted to conveying Yahweh's word as accurately and completely as possible, and to do so to the widest audience possible. Well, none of us would be the least bit jealous. In fact, we would all celebrate another group of individuals doing.
I don't see how you could have a jealous bone in your body about this. This is all good for all of us.
Right. So even if it's not speaking of us, but of someone else, doesn't take away any of the beauty of this song, any of the relevance of this song.
No, we still get to participate, doing the same thing he said. That was his will for us.
Yeah, still enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
We can still, and I'm convinced that we can still climb aboard the ark with Noah, and we can still jump into the midst of this garden with God.
Well, I look forward to next week on this.
Yeah. Oh, it gets better. It gets better. All right, fellas. Well, thank you. I enjoyed doing this with you. Have a marvelous
Great
Shabbat.
day, y'all. Thank you, JB.
Good day. I'll shoot you an updated copy of this once I make more progress on it, and I'm sure that Jackie sooner or later will. She's now cleaned up and giving me a much better copy of 13.
Correct all your grammar errors.
Yeah. It's not so many grammar errors. It's just typos. You can't write this much this fast. This is 3 days' work, and it's already 4 days.
Brain's going faster than the fingers.
Oh yeah. In fact, every aspect of this chapter so far has materialized faster in my brain than I can type it into the keyboard.
You're on to good stuff right there.
You're on to good stuff, yeah. The foundation is there. The desire is there. And once you begin to understand, it just all falls into place. Now, that doesn't mean that, I would tell you that if we were to go through this exact same series of 7 statements again, an hour from now, we would all come up with insights that we missed the last time.
Oh, yeah. That's why we chew the cud.
That's where it works.
That's why we chew the cud. That is why we chew the cud. All right, fellas, good night. I appreciate it.
Good night. Shabbat shalom.
See you next week.
For putting up with it.
Okay, take care.